right, late night post, late night. So I've been out in Orlando most of the day. I've been thinking about this video, for a while. I wasn't really sure how to put this, so I wanted to think on this one. So coming in at number 8. So yeah, 8. We got Mackenzie with Waffle Rockets. So I'll say this at the very beginning before we go into it further, just because I know Mac will watch this video at some point. Mac, you were the toughest team to grade. The team has, I believe, a very good foundation, but it's difficult for me to go with the super high or super low, so I just took the middle ground. It's not actually that I believe you'll finish 8th. It's more along the lines of I wasn't really sure where to put you, so I stuck to the middle. Basically saying like a back-end playoff team, because I can see it going right and I can see it going wrong. So in the end, I ended up just being like, all right, I'll just split the difference and kind of explain my reasoning. But that's why you are here. Whether you agree or disagree with the teams I have ahead of you or behind you. But starting things off at 7, he took Kamara. Now, I know some people are afraid of Alvin because Drew Brees is gone, and he was the top scoring back last year. And he's super consistent, even at working through that high ankle sprain and everything a couple years ago. But even with Drew Brees being gone, knowing Kamara has a really good offensive line, and Michael Thomas is out, he's the clear-cut number 1 option in New Orleans, at least for the time being. Whether Jameis is successful as a quarterback is a good question. I think Sean Payton's a tremendous play caller, though. I mean, Todd Gurley had amazing fantasy years under Sean McVay with Jared Goff. Devonta Freeman had an amazing fantasy year under Kyle Shanahan with Matt Ryan. I kind of see Alvin Kamara is the same way with Sean Payton. So, great offensive play caller, really good O-line, tremendous talent at running back. I guess maybe Freeman, not so much anymore, but at his peak, Freeman was a very, very good running back. Anyway, the point is, I think Kamara is a very good running back. I think he's got a very good offensive line. I think he's got an elite head coach slash offensive play caller. So it's really about how much will he receive the ball from Jameis. But in the last 4 years, he's had 81 receptions, 81 receptions, 81 receptions, and 83 receptions. So, I mean, probably getting around 81 receptions with or without Drew Brees, just because he's the top option there. I suppose he might get less workload. They might work in Latavius Murray, but it is late. It is after 1 a.m. But at the same time, I think, Kamara typically stays healthy. He's in great offense that suits his talents. He's just a rock-solid player. He was the number 1 fantasy player last year. I guess it's a slight overpay just because, the only player to go ahead of him was, Cook at 83, and I guess McCaffrey went 79 as well. But, you got a top 5 running back. I can't really argue with it. And I think the volume will be there anyway. So I see him basically as the same player as I saw last year. Something else I like, you took Chris Carson at 24, and you got him for $39. I think that's a steal. I called it the best value in our draft. And I think Chris Carson for $39 is the best value in our draft. Now, granted, he has never appeared in more than 14 games in a season, so I don't think he's going to make it through all 17 games, obviously. But when he played in full last year in 11 games, he was like the number 7 running back. And it seems like under new offensive coordinator Shane Waldron, and obviously head coach Pete Carroll, Seattle wants to run the ball more. So, yeah, I imagine he will get quite a bit of play. Rashad Penny did not look that great in preseason when he wasn't injured. Alex Collins did look good, so I suppose you picked up the handcuff in free agency. I'm not sure if it's Penny or Collins as the number 2. I think it might be Penny, but Collins looked better in the preseason, so we'll see if he usurped him or not. I'm honestly surprised Seattle stuck by Penny this long considering his injury history, but I digress. I think getting Carson at 39 was a steal. It was a very good deal, especially because even with his injury history, and even though I personally don't really believe in Chris Carson, his running style is more that of a bruising back that tends to age quickly. He reminds me a lot of LeGarrette Blount, and once he hits that cliff, he falls off. But he just got an extension, so I don't think he's hit the cliff just yet. He's only 26, so I think he's running back's prime years, like I believe historically is 25 years old. So I guess we could start towards a descent, but I don't think he's going to fall off the cliff, at least not this year. I think the O-line is better than it's been in Seattle in a while. I think it's a slightly below average, maybe as good as average, as long as they get left tackle Dwayne Brown in there. But the point is, I could see Carson getting like 1,000 yards rushing, maybe 250 yards receiving, and score like 8 touchdowns. So kind of relatively close to what he did last year. I'm just counting him on playing closer to 14 games than like 11 that he did last year because he missed like 5. There's a bug. But anyway, I think he's underrated. I think he's a rock solid number 2. I think it was a great price at 39. I was surprised because again, I mentioned later on with Justin, even though I think Antonio Gibson has great potential, getting Antonio Gibson for 70 when you could have had Chris Carson for 39 is kind of crazy to me. The next pick is kind of where we diverge. So I, kind of like you, went heavy at running back initially. You spent 79 on Kamara, I spent 79 on McCaffrey. You spent 39 on Carson, I spent 49 on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Where we diverge is this. I was surprised at 25 to see you literally the pick right after Carson to spend 51 on David Montgomery. Now, it's not that I dislike David Montgomery, nor is it that I believe you overpaid for David Montgomery. I think maybe slightly, but it's around where I had him marketed as. So, like, you basically paid, like, sticker price on Montgomery. So, that's not really the issue I take. I think Montgomery's good. The second half of his schedule was relatively easy last year, which helps explain why he exploded in the second half. He was really good for Sarah in that second half, but his schedule was really, really easy. There were a confluence of things. Tariq Cohen got hurt. They had to put in Trubisky again. Trubisky was bad. But all in all, give him credit. He looked very good down the stretch. And I think people were underrating him. And I think you basically bet relatively about his value. And I think he will get his 1,000 yards and his 1,000 yards rushing, 350 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns, relatively around Carson. So that makes him a solid number 2 running back. So why do I have a problem then if I think you paid fair price and I have a high value on him? Well, hindsight is 20/20, obviously. And I think, but even during the draft, I put a little star next to this pick because I thought it was super interesting because your team was so similar. At least you started out your team so similarly to mine. You were spending big on a third running back. And I want to see, just like, okay, he's going for Montgomery here. That means he's basically out. He's out for the rest of the draft. Like, he can't go big on anything. And while I think you got a good value on him, I think the savings with Carson could have been pocketed to spread a little bit more depth around, and especially because there were deals to be had not only on the middle tier of receiver, but also on like towards the end, like the end of the number 2 running backs and the beginning of the flex. I would have preferred a downgrade from Montgomery to like Damian Harris when I take into consideration that Harris only costs 15 and Montgomery costs 51. Or we could do the same exercise with Raheem Mostert costs 15 and David Montgomery costs 51. Or we could do this all day. What's another good example? Yeah, I got Gus Edwards for 14, and David Montgomery costs 15. The point, like, Mike Davis was like 28. So the point I'm trying to make is this, more so. I disagreed with going in on Montgomery, mostly because I felt as though it was a little overtly aggressive in the sense that you were capping yourself out. You were taking yourself off the board, and while I think you did have savings from Carson, and I think you paid fairly for Montgomery, and I think, Kamara at 79 is good, you're betting the farm on the 3 of them. And while I don't disagree with betting the farm on running backs, historically running backs are the key, I talk about this. I like to diversify my team. I like to diversify how much investment I have into something. Diversify my risk, just like like my stock portfolio. And Myles Gaskin went for like 27. I think these players are worse than Montgomery. I don't think they'll have as good a year as Montgomery. I think Montgomery was had at a fair price. But the opportunity cost of me getting a third running back, which, while good, and while a very good player, isn't as great as getting some steals. Like, imagine if I got Damian Harris at like 16 and, I don't know, Darren Waller. Darren Waller went for like 21. Or we got like Myles Gaskin at 27 and Brandon Ayuk at 20. Or Cooper Kupp for 20 and Darrell Henderson for 29. Like, there was just a lot. You basically, by taking Montgomery at 25 for the 51, you didn't have another pick for 80 picks. And it's just a long time to take yourself off the board. The only thing comparable to that, like even the auto draft team was not off the board that big. Like, I think the auto draft team, what made the team so bad in auto draft, and I haven't really talked about this, but what made it so bad wasn't the beginning, even though the beginning was kind of reckless. It was just the middle, where there was no money to spend on anything in the middle, and it had to wait all the way till the back end, and the back end was just ridiculous. I think it started out at like pick 89, and then it doesn't make another pick until 179, so like 90 picks in between. One thing I learned in all of my mocks, you don't want a big gap in between when you make picks. Even if I'm getting a really good value and a fair price, you don't want the gaps, because it means that you essentially, not only are you taking yourself off the board, but it means that you don't really get to chase any sort of like value that could be had at some position in the middle. It's very difficult to make that up on the back end. So again, this is why I kind of put your team like here at number 8, because I have a hard time really moving it up on teams that I really like or I think have a lot of potential, or moving it down on teams that I don't like and I think aren't built very well and have issues that I can easily see exploited. But your team just, it befuddles me. Mostly, and it starts with this very pick, because I like Montgomery, And again, I think the price is fair, and I don't think you overpaid. I mean, maybe possibly a little, but we're talking like a couple bucks. Is just the opportunity cost of taking him and taking yourself out of the board and then waiting a really long time, kind of like myself at receiver, but even more so like no elite quarterback, no real like maybe roll of the dice running back in the back end, more of a just taking handcuffs, no real like high, like I guess you took some high upside rookies, but yeah, it's just it's hard. It's hard for me to justify moving you up against teams that I think really work the board so well, have more depth than you, and really have quality up and down their lineup. Because by doing this, we can move on to the next pick. So you went from 25 to 105, which is Jerry Judy, who was basically your big buy at any other position after spending all of that at the 3 running back positions. I like Judy. Judy is a good player. He played well last year, but that was without Cortland Sutton. I'm interested to see what happens with Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a terrific player, but I don't know if he'll get more volume. I could see him as being a adequate, possibly number 2 receiver, maybe get 1,000 yards, hopefully. But I don't. He's risky, mostly because I'm feeling like Denver's going to go pretty run heavy. That's why they took Devonta Williams. And while I like Sutton's upside, and I like Sutton's upside more than him, just because Sutton seems like a breakout candidate, especially because he's taken back the number 1 job, and Judy's kind of like ceded that to him, even though he was the number 1 almost all of last year, which is strange to me. But yeah, I would have preferred Sutton to Judy, even though Judy's the first round pick. And then right after that, you took Tyro Williams, who's the number 1 in Detroit. I like Tyro Williams. He missed last year with a torn labrum. I guess he's the number 1 with the former head coach of the Chargers, Anthony Lynn, as the offensive coordinator. So I guess they're going to run the ball with the committee or Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift a lot. Hopefully Tyrell stays healthy. He hasn't done that in a while. He looked like a good player back in 2016, but since then he hasn't been better than wide receiver 45. And so we're talking 5 years now. I guess he's the number 1. I guess he got targets, so he's got a floor. After that, we took Devonta Smith. I like Devonta. I mean, I think he's another first-round pick of the Eagles, so him and Rager together. He's very thin. He's 6'1", $175. But he's really quick. He's shifty. Hopefully, Jalen Hurts can get him the ball. I think maybe, he'll have 900 yards, maybe 5 touchdowns. I don't really see him as a red zone threat, but he's like a flex option. You took Logan Thomas. I think Thomas will be good on an ascendant Washington team. Maybe get 700 yards, but he's probably staying on your bench for a while because you can't really trust him. After that, you took Waddle. I'm just gonna be straight up here. People have been asking me. It's just Hannah has Tua, and you have Waddle, and Sarah has Gesicki, and Ryan has Myles Gaskin, and there's a lot of people in our league with bodies in freaking Miami with Miami players. I think what is it? Andre has Devontae Parker, and I just keep going in it through my head. I'm just there's a whole lot of mouths to feed, and they basically just elevated the running backs coach to be the offensive coordinator. So we don't even really know what the offense is going to look like. And it wasn't that good in the preseason, which the preseason doesn't really matter. I'll be the first to tell you I don't really judge anything on the preseason. I just mostly want to see what kind of personnel you use. I don't actually care about the execution or any of that because there's no game script. Anyway, the point is I don't really know what to make of Miami. Tua didn't look that great this year, and I'm surprised there are so many people in our league who took like Miami players. Like, there's a lot of mouths to feed in Miami. You got Gaskin, Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, Jalen Waddle, Will Fuller, Mike Gesicki, and we're not even getting to like Malcolm Brown or Albert Wilson. Is the O-line that great? It's not that great. It's like average, hopefully. Are they running like last year? They were running kind of like a spread horizontal offense, and now I'm not really sure what they're running. I don't even know if it suits Tua's style. Miami's a big unknown, so I'm just really confused why so many people in our league like invested in Miami. Even if it was a little, I was just like, really? Do you know, like, I don't even know what kind of offense they're running. And usually I'm in the weeds about that kind of stuff. And I have no idea because they're just like, they were so vanilla. And they don't really talk about, I don't know. Miami's weird. I'm just weirded out by how many people, like, have Miami investments in our league when I wanted none of that. Anyway, the point is, Waddle's got a lot of competition. You know, maybe with his pedigree, he'll be a good player. I see him more as like a low-end flex. I like the Hardman pick with Sammy Watkins gone. Maybe he can turn into something. Really, it's the Travis Kelce, CEH, Tyreek Hill show. So if one of them gets hurt, you know, maybe he's got some play. But, you know, just kind of a lottery ticket. I like Fitzpatrick. I like waiting on quarterback. You got a quality quarterback in Fitzpatrick. I think he'll be terrific. He'll get close to like 4,000 yards, maybe like mid-20s touchdowns, but he'll be like a good starter. And I think we already cut Nelson Aguilar already, and we had Alexander Madison, who's the handcuff to Dalvin Cook, and we brought in Alex Collins, who was probably the handcuff to Chris Carson, and then I'm missing someone else. Devontae Booker, who's the handcuff to Saquon. I don't know why. I don't know what Ryan's doing. Ryan's just not getting rid of his extra cornerbacks for whatever reason right now. Anyway, all of that being said, I don't overtly like the team, if that's not clear enough. It's not that I dislike the players or even the value. The opportunity cost was very high. I found it to be very risky. I found it to be, I told Justin, you gotta be more aggressive. I told Hannah, patient aggression. With you, I kind of wish you did like Brian, which just sounds kind of weird. Brian was very patient. Brian let things kind of come to him, and he just kind of worked the board, and he let it really, I was very impressed with his draft. It's just very deep. Obviously, he's not running the three running backs as you are, but it was very deep. He had some interesting back end players. You took Devonta Smith, he got Rager for $1. You took Alexander Madison, he got Tony Pollard for $1 or $2. You took Ryan Fitzpatrick, he took Ryan Tannehill, but he's much, much deeper at receiver. He's got basically the same depth, and I think just breakout candidates are much higher than yours. And that's really kind of the way I look at it. You kind of need Kamara to basically be what he was last year, which I think he can be. I think Kamara's excellent. And you kind of need Carson to stay healthy most of the year, which I think he can. I think, he played 11 games last year, but, hopefully he plays 12, 14 games this year. And you kind of need David Montgomery to be as good as he was towards the second half of last year to be a top 10 running back. And then once those three are all good, then you can you're pushing for being really good. The thing, I guess, is I don't know if all three of those things are going to happen. And you've put all of your eggs into this basket instead of diversifying it. That's part of the reason why I was surprised to see you go for Montgomery. And that's part of the reason why I did not do something similar to yours. I kind of just I'll just quietly take Gus Edwards on the cheap, and then I'll get like Zach Moss for $8 and Mark Andrews. I try to just like, get some value on the back end for depth. I just think that's really important, especially in something like this with auction. It was very difficult. I think a good example, I haven't brought it up, but like between picks like 25 and 105, let's see, I have Andre a little higher than you, so I have Andre like 6th, and you're like 8th? So Andre had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 picks between David Montgomery and Jerry Judy. He made 7 picks in between those two. That's a lot of depth. That's like most of his starters. And I think that was the thing. Like, I think your team reminds me of Ryan Fitzpatrick. It can be Fitzmagic and you can fly and it will be very good some weeks. But other weeks, something could happen, and like let's say Kamara like has a high ankle sprain and he's out, or Chris Carson's out for a few games and you got to put in Collins. You're kind of stuck then because you don't have the depth at receiver. You're kind of like, I like the high upside plays, but you kind of need them to work now, and that's kind of a scary thing. I think you're deeper at receiver than, for example, my team, but that's not exactly a good thing because my team's probably has the worst receiving core in the league. So, and my team might be the only team that you have a receiving core that is better than an actual team. Like, I think literally everyone else has a better receiving core. Yeah, I think everyone else has a better receiving core than myself. And I think your receiving core is only better than mine. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe you can find receivers, but you've put yourself so much. You and I are very similar, and the reason why I have you 8th is because you've put yourself in a hole where now it's just you and I are fighting on free agency for receivers. And I don't know if you want to be there. I'm sure maybe you can find something quicker than I can, possibly, but that means you're going to be fighting me every single week to find receivers, and my receivers are so trash that I'm going to quickly cycle through them. You already dumped Aguilar, and he got eaten up very quickly. What if Hardman is just Sammy Watkins? Then you got to dump him. What if Waddle's stuck in Miami? Then you got to dump him. What if Devonta Smith happens to be like Jalen Hurts is exactly what he is? Then you got to dump him. And then all you got left is like Jerry Judy and Devonta Smith. And I can say the same for myself. But that's the rub. That's the scary thing with your team. So it's not that I dislike your team. It's not that I don't think you'll make the playoffs. It's not that I don't think your team is deep. It's just, this is more of a personal thing where I'm just like, I felt it was too aggressive, and I don't know if it was the right thing to do. I really don't know. I think your team is a good experiment. I think you will figure it out. I think you'll find some help with players. I just have a hard time seeing you win a championship with this team when I know that the teams above you are a little further along. And it's just going to be it's going to be difficult for both you and I to have to fight through and get receivers. It would be one thing if it was just like you looking for receivers or me looking for receivers. But now it's both of us in the same position competing against all these other teams who are much deeper at a position where they can start like 3 or 4 of them. And yeah, I like Jerry Judy. I think Tyro Williams will be the number 1 in Detroit. I think, Devonta Smith has a lot of talent. I think he's really thin and skinny, but I think the same thing of Jalen Waddle is really thin and skinny, and that's why I didn't really want either of them. I could see, them reaching their upside, though, if Jalen Hurts goes bananas or Tua turns into something that I'm uncertain he is. Maybe he goes Justin Herbert. I don't know. I can't really wrap my head around seeing all of that. Nothing in the personnel, nothing in the coaching staffs. It's kind of like the way I just described Miami. Like, this team is just very, it's like a blind spot. I'm not really sure where to put things. Like, I really like Kamara, and I think Carson was a really good value, and I think Montgomery's a fair price. You got to have, like, almost everything go right, and I'm not sure there's potential. Like, if Kamara has the season he has last year, and Montgomery has the season he has last year, and Carson has the season he has last year, this team is on a top-end team, but even still will have a hard time getting to a championship because there's no real, I guess the only potential is if one of the rookies turns into Justin Jefferson. But I have a very difficult time seeing that. Or Jerry Judy, I suppose, turns into Justin Jefferson. That too. But even still, it's just, this team is very strange to me, and I just took the middle because I didn't really know where to put it. I don't disagree with what you did. I think during the draft when I saw it, I was just like, I just thought it was risky. It was riskier than even I was willing to go. I don't think it's your worst draft. I just also don't think it's your best draft. It was like your first auction draft. Maybe it will work out and it will be good and it will serve as a case study of, okay, you got to fill like your 3 running backs. But I felt like you were zigging when everyone was zagging, and sometimes that can be very good. But the whole middle tier of receiver was just like gone once you took Montgomery. And there was quality depth to be found, and I think as the draft continued on, it showed that there was some, on the very back end of RB2, maybe top of the flex, there was some running backs that you could get for like a decent price. I don't think it would have been great. Getting stuck with David Johnson at $10 would have sucked. But even still, like Josh Jacobs for 30 isn't bad, and you could take some of that leftover money and put it towards like Antonio Brown or something. Just to make your team a little deeper, because the difference between Tyro Williams and Antonio Brown is pretty big, and the difference between like David Montgomery and Damian Harris, I think, is a little smaller actually, which is kind of weird to say, but it was a very narrow like back end, but we knew going into this there was a mid-tier of receivers that would be available, and unfortunately, you took yourself out of that, and I don't know if it was wrong or right. I just knew that I didn't want to do that, and so that's why your team's really in the blind spot. Maybe it will work. I don't know. I really don't know. This team's very. I didn't really know how to judge this team because I like the picks. I understand the logic. I wouldn't do it. I would not do it myself. Like the other stuff, I look back and it's like, oh, that makes sense. This befuddles me. I'm just kind of like, well. Anyway, I don't know if that made sense. That was a weird rant. It's very late. I ought to be tired, but I've been drinking quite a bit of coffee. But I think your team's good. I think you'll make the playoffs. I think, obviously, you'll more than likely figure things out. I do think, though, you'll have a hard time just because, like, other than Stefan, each of the out-of-town guys had really good drafts. Even Ryan, whose back-end depth doesn't make any sense to me. The lineup is really good. So, yeah, I guess that's another thing. Among, like, all the out-of-town people, there's 6 of them, and you're, like, number 5. So, a lot of the in-town people had bad drafts. But yeah, I couldn't put you anywhere. I couldn't put you any higher. I couldn't do it. Anyway, that's it. I hope that made sense, Mac. If not, ask me any questions. You're my 8th team. I'm going to go to sleep. Good night.